Today, you will learn the purpose of your life. Have you ever wondered why you are here and what your life truly means? The purpose of your life? It's bigger than you think, and it's waiting for you to discover it. This isn't just about religion or philosophy. It's about you, your struggles, your dreams, and the reason you're alive right now, in this moment. The Bible is full of stories that answer life's deepest questions, and today, we're diving into one that might just change the way you see everything. Whether you believe in God or not, this story speaks to every single one of us. Have you ever felt like you're wandering through life, wondering, why am I even here? What's the point of it all? If you've asked those questions, you're not alone. But what if I told you the answer has been waiting for you all along, hidden in a story that's thousands of years old? Think about it. How many people wake up every day feeling like they're stuck on a treadmill? They go to school, they go to work, they scroll through their phones, but deep down, there's this nagging feeling, is this it? Is this all there is to my life? And here's the real kicker. Most people don't even try to find the answer. They distract themselves, settle for less, or tell themselves they'll figure it out later. But what if later never comes? Let's start with a story you might have heard before, the story of Moses. Here's a guy who had every reason to believe his life didn't have a purpose. Born into a time when his people were oppressed, he was saved by a miracle, raised in a palace, and then lost it all. He ran away to the desert, hiding from his past, his people, and his mistakes. Sounds familiar, right? How often do we feel like we're stuck in the middle of nowhere, not knowing which way to go? Imagine Moses as a young man, full of potential but conflicted about his identity. He was a Hebrew by birth, but raised as an Egyptian prince. On one hand, he had the privilege and power of royalty. On the other, he felt a deep connection to the suffering of his people. Can you picture that tension? The constant internal battle between who you are, who the world says you should be, and who you feel you're meant to be. That's Moses. And honestly, isn't that all of us at some point? One day everything fell apart. Moses saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave, and he couldn't stand by. He acted on impulse and killed the Egyptian. It was a moment of passion, but it came with massive consequences. Suddenly, the life Moses knew, the palace, the privilege, the safety, was gone. He had to flee for his life, ending up in the wilderness of Midian. Now pause and think about this. How often do we make decisions that in the moment feel right but lead to consequences we weren't prepared for? Moses was trying to stand up for justice, but his actions led to isolation and fear. He spent the next 40 years tending sheep, far away from the life he once knew. Imagine the thoughts running through his mind during those years. I blew it. My chance is gone. I'm nobody now. Can you relate to that? The feeling that your mistakes have disqualified you from ever doing something meaningful? But here's the thing about God. He doesn't give up on us, even when we give up on ourselves. One ordinary day, while Moses was doing his usual routine, something extraordinary happened. He saw a bush that was on fire but wasn't burning up. That's already unusual, but what's even more incredible is what happened next. God spoke to him through the bush. Moses, Moses, he said, and Moses responded, here I am. Let's break this down for a second. Moses wasn't out searching for God or trying to find his purpose. He was just going about his everyday life, probably thinking this was just another uneventful day in the desert. But God stepped in, right in the middle of Moses's ordinary routine, and called his name. Doesn't that tell you something? Sometimes we think we have to be in the perfect place or the perfect mindset to hear from God, but often he shows up when we least expect it. And notice Moses's response, here I am. It's such a simple statement, but it's profound. He didn't say, what do you want? Or why are you bothering me? He just said, here I am. That's the first step to discovering your purpose, being present, being open, and saying, here I am. God didn't waste any time. He told Moses he had seen the suffering of the Israelites and was going to use Moses to deliver them from Egypt. Now, if you were Moses, how would you react? Probably the same way he did, with a mix of fear, doubt, and excuses. Moses said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt. And isn't that the question we all ask when faced with something bigger than ourselves? Who am I? God's response was simple but powerful. I will be with you. Think about that for a moment. God didn't give Moses a detailed plan or a list of qualifications. He just promised his presence. And that's all Moses needed, even if he didn't realize it yet. But Moses wasn't convinced. He started listing all the reasons why he wasn't the right person for the job. What if they don't believe me? What if they ask who sent me? I'm not a good speaker. Please send someone else. Sound familiar? How many times do we let our insecurities and fears talk us out of stepping into our purpose? Moses saw himself as inadequate, but God saw him as chosen. Here's where it gets interesting. God didn't argue with Moses' excuses. Instead, he equipped him. He gave Moses signs to perform, like turning his staff into a snake and making his hand leprous and then healed. These weren't just party tricks. They were signs that God's power would be with Moses every step of the way. And yet Moses still hesitated. Even after all the reassurance, he begged God to send someone else. That's how deep his self-doubt ran. But God didn't give up on him. Instead, he brought Aaron, Moses' brother, to help. This is such a beautiful reminder that God meets us where we are. Even when we feel like we can't do it alone, he brings people into our lives to support and encourage us. Now think about your own life. What's the burning bush moment for you? It might not be as dramatic as a voice from a flaming shrub, but God has a way of getting our attention. Maybe it's a conversation, a feeling you can't shake, or an opportunity that seems too big for you. Whatever it is, it's God's way of saying, I see you, I know you, and I have something for you to do. Moses eventually obeyed, and his life was never the same. He went from a runaway shepherd to one of the greatest leaders in history. But it didn't happen because Moses was perfect or fearless. It happened because he said yes, even when he felt unqualified. So here's the question. What's holding you back from saying yes? Maybe you're afraid of failing. Maybe you think you're not good enough. Or maybe you're just comfortable where you are. But comfort never leads to purpose. Purpose requires stepping out in faith, even when you don't have all the answers. The story of Moses is a powerful reminder that your purpose isn't about you. It's about what God can do through you. It's not about being perfect, it's about being willing. And just like Moses, you might find that your greatest impact comes from the very places where you feel the weakest. As you reflect on this story, take a moment to think about your own life. Where have you been hiding? What excuses have you been making? And most importantly, are you ready to say, here I am? Let's think more about that moment in Moses' life, when he's standing there barefoot in front of a burning bush, hearing God tell him he's chosen to do something incredible. For a moment, imagine being Moses. This isn't just a little task God is handing him. God is asking him to walk straight back into Egypt, a place where he's considered a criminal, where he's seen as a murderer. Egypt represents everything Moses wanted to leave behind, his mistakes, his fears, his failures. And yet God is saying, that's exactly where I'm sending you. Why? Because purpose often involves facing the things we're most afraid of. Think about that. The very places where we feel the weakest, the most ashamed, or the most unqualified are often the places where God wants to work the most. Why? Because when it happens, it's undeniable that it was God, not us. Let's pause here and reflect on something. Why do you think Moses felt so inadequate? He grew up in a palace, surrounded by wealth, power, and education. From the outside, he looked like someone who had everything he needed to succeed. But deep down, Moses was carrying a heavy burden of shame. He remembered the faces of the people he left behind. He remembered the crime he committed. He remembered how he ran instead of staying to face the consequences. Isn't that just like us? On the outside, we might look like we have it all together. We smile, we post happy photos, we go about our daily lives. But inside, there's that voice that whispers, you're not good enough. You've messed up too much. You'll never be enough. That's the voice Moses was battling. But here's the beauty of Moses' story. God didn't see him the way Moses saw himself. Where Moses saw a failure, God saw potential. Where Moses saw weakness, God saw strength waiting to be unleashed. And the same is true for you. God doesn't look at your resume of mistakes and say, well, guess I can't use them. No, he looks at you and says, this is exactly who I want. Now let's zoom out for a moment. The story of Moses isn't just about one man. It's a reflection of how God works in all of our lives. Over and over in the Bible, God chooses the least likely people to do the most extraordinary things. Why? Because it's not about their power. It's about his. Take David, for example. He was the youngest son in his family, a shepherd boy who spent his days watching sheep. When the prophet Samuel came looking for a king, David's own father didn't even bother to bring him in from the fields. Talk about being overlooked. And yet, David was the one God chose to defeat Goliath, lead a nation, and write psalms that still inspire people today. Or think about Jonah. God gave him a mission to go to Nineveh and warn the people to turn from their wicked ways. But Jonah didn't want to go. He ran in the opposite direction and ended up in the belly of a fish. Talk about running from your purpose. And yet, God didn't give up on Jonah. He brought him back, gave him a second chance, and used him to save an entire city. And then there's Peter, one of Jesus's closest disciples. Peter was impulsive, emotional, and far from perfect. He denied Jesus 3 times on the night of his arrest. But after the resurrection, Jesus didn't hold Peter's failure against him. Instead, he reinstated Peter, telling him, "Feed my sheep." Peter went on to become one of the most influential leaders in the early church. Do you see the pattern here? God doesn't call the perfect, the powerful, or the polished. He calls the broken, the doubtful, and the imperfect. And then he does something amazing. He works through them. Now, let's bring it back to Moses. After God told Moses, "I will be with you," he gave him a specific mission to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and into the promised land. But let's be real. This wasn't going to be easy. Pharaoh wasn't just going to let the Israelites go. This was going to be a battle.